I want to say thank you so much right off the bat here for DJI for partnering with us for this webinar, this monthly series that we do with them. And I also want to say thanks to Grant Hagan from the Beck Group for joining us to present today. Quick agenda here. We're going to do just quick intros on me and Grant. We're going to run through very quickly on DJI solutions and Skycatch solutions, and then really spend the bulk of our time with Grant from the Beck Group teaching us about using drone data with BIM and how he's really been able to have some very impressive and innovative success doing that on his projects. And then we'll spend probably the last 30 minutes doing Q&A. So while Grant is presenting, please everybody just send in your questions on the chat using the GoToWebinar control panel, and we will be logging those, and we will get to them in the order they come in right after Grant finishes. So Grant's going to go ahead and introduce himself in more detail, but I just want to say that he's been using drones on his construction projects for at least 4 years. He's truly a trailblazer in the industry, and he's come up with some really, I would say, powerful and extremely effective ways to bring this data into your normal or sort of standard construction project in ways that really make a difference for the bottom line for those projects. And he's going to teach us some of those techniques today that everybody on this webinar will be able to go ahead and implement in their own projects today. Bart Vandervoort is a manager for BD in the EMEA region for DJI. Normally he joins us in these webinars, and he had a conflict today. He's not actually with us. I'll go ahead and cover his part for him. And again, my name is Patrick Stewart, and I'm the Director of Product at Skycatch. So quick for DJI, they're really putting a big focus on commercial applications, enterprise applications this year. Many of you may have seen some recent announcements about a new drone they're releasing, but they're really the industry leader. We're really thankful to be partnering with them on this and some other things, and we think that there's just nobody who can really make an airframe and a platform like DJI does. And speaking of those, here's a select few that Bart has chosen sort of to talk about here. Phantom 4 Pro is sort of one of the newer ones that they've released. It has a 20 megapixel camera. It's a really amazing solution for the construction industry. The M100 is a great developer platform, and I think, lastly we would touch on bottom center there is the Matrice 200 series, which they recently announced, which is really their first dedicated platform that's truly dedicated to industrial use cases. Carries 2 cameras. You can add their DRTK system to it. You can extend it with their onboard SDK. It has an attachment. They attach a camera to the top, so you can do inspections on bridges and things where the camera needs to look up. We're really excited to see that thing hit the market. For Skycatch, we are a provider of all of the tools that you need to use drone data in your construction projects. It starts with the Flight app, which automates DJI drones as well as the Skycatch drone. Special things about that are intelligent routing that keeps the drone inside the exact area that you create, along with terrain following. It's set up for repeat data collection and really just to make this thing really easy and consistent. After you collect your photos, we offer image processing in the cloud. We really focus on making it easy and fast and giving you the files that you need. We give all the standard outputs: ortho, mosaic, point cloud, mesh, but also contours, digital surface model, digital terrain model. And I think really importantly is we'll deliver those in whatever coordinate system you use on your project, be it sort of a known regional or state plane or an arbitrary system that was started by an architect or somebody early in the project. And then once you have the process data and the files, we offer visualization and analysis tools. In the cloud also, we're focused on multi-user teams. Bigger organizations, you have 2D and 3D viewing right in the web. You can import CAD plans and overlay those so you can see exact progress to plan, do volume measurements, area measurements, as well as easy sharing via links. Okay, so now let's get to the good part here. I think one thing for the audience, I want to make sure that everybody understands the objective Flying is great and it's fun, and it's important, and we think it's been pretty well covered. We really want to focus today and in our webinar series on getting to the information, which is where we really get all the value out of this. And so Grant's gonna cover a really important topic on that today. So with that, Grant, I'd love to turn it over to you and say thank you again for joining us, and really looking forward to your presentation here and what you can teach really the rest of the market about how you've learned through your experience and what is really the most effective way to use this data in your current processes.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Patrick. Man, it's just humbling to be here with so many just industry leaders that hop onto these webinar series, and not only just with Skycatch, but also DJI, who I think many of us on the call have kind of could probably echo too how much they've changed not only just the industry, but our specific workflows as well. So I want to just thank you guys for having me, and to the people on the call, just thank you for giving up an hour of your day. I know a lot of you guys have extremely busy schedules, and I can relate on a lot of those fronts. And so my hope, like Patrick was saying, is that this time would really be effective for you, that you would see some things that, man, our hope would be that you could implement this or take these nuggets to really change today, or even in meetings tomorrow that you might have if you're starting to use this data. So without kind of further ado, just to give you a little background, one, about the Beck Group and kind of where we're from and what we do. Patrick, you can go ahead and hop to the next slide here. So for those who haven't heard of us, we're based out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And so we have different regional offices, as you can kind of see here on this map. But where I office out of specifically is in our Dallas-Fort Worth, which is kind of our headquarters. We have about 750 employees. The big thing to note that kind of sets us apart is the integrated part of our company. So we staff both architecture and construction folks with different backgrounds that will do third-party architecture work and we'll do third-party construction work. But really the hope of what we're trying to push forward is what we call integrated work, which will do the architecture and construction for specific clients. And so the project that we're going to feature today, we'll talk about one of those integrated jobs and how we were really able to leverage this drone data for this project specifically. So what I wanted to kind of do is give you guys a framework, because it's hard to hop into some of this stuff without kind of getting a gist of what project we specifically use this on. So I have a couple quick notes here on this next slide to really kind of frame out the project that we were able to utilize this on. And what it was is it was in our healthcare team for one of our clients down here in the Metroplex in Mansfield, Texas. So it's a little bit south central Dallas-Fort Worth. But it's a really unique building. This client was looking to do a recovery and wellness center and think really, really nice amenities when it comes to anything that you'd be recovering from, whether that's health related or mental related. But the key here is that it was an integrated project. So Beck was the architect of record on the project, as well as the contractor building this project. And so we've had just a really special relationship with this client, where they've really seen a lot of the value that integrated work of doing both the architecture and construction has brought value to them. And so we're really excited to be a part of this project as well. Size-wise, you can see kind of some statistics there. $30 million, which the time frame to get that done was almost about 11 months. And so we're wrapping it up here within the next kind of 2 months here to turn it over to the client. But we also have a Skycatch blog post about this specific project with some really good quotes from our project team out there to really hit on that if you have a chance to go check that out too. So, but without further ado, I really wanted to get into the specifics of really why you're here and why we're hoping to just share some knowledge with you guys. How I kind of have this broken out is a specific kind of ways that we have seen these tools be extremely valuable as it comes to not only BIM coordination meetings, but just site-specific meetings. And so on this next slide here, really what I wanted to address is kind of the elephant in the room, which is that I think a lot of people think that meetings can be really effective, but they maybe aren't necessarily the most effective. And so we all know that the site meetings and BIM coordination meetings are essential, but man, they can be so ineffective at times. And so these are just 3 points that kind of speak to that, of why they can be ineffective, which is, man, just having the same information that gets presented week after week. I think a lot of you can relate and sitting in meetings and wondering, man, we've talked about a lot of these topics. Why have we not moved on? The second point there is, man, quality of information can get really, really low, meaning that the folks in the field may not have a really good understanding of what's going on in the office, and getting that information translated out to the field, because the quality of information discussed might not necessarily be there. And then the last point here is really, it's really hard to visualize, even if you're in a field office where you're out on site, to visualize what needs to be done in the field. Even making that connection, it may be feet away from your job site trailer, to the people who are out in the field, erecting the scaffolding or putting up different scopes of work in the building specifically. It can get really, really hard to visualize what needs to be done in the field. So I love this quote. It was from one of our superintendents on this project specifically. And he said, man, we're only paid to build these buildings once, and the correct interpretation, along with having the correct visual aids, allows everyone to be on the same page. And I think what I like about this quote is it's just practical. A lot of us can relate to needing the correct visual aids to get everyone on the same page. And the last part of this is, man, to have the same internal image in their mind as to what it should look like is crucial. And the sooner that we can do that, the better off we'll be. And so that kind of just frames out the problem, which is really running effective meetings out on site, whether that's a specific meeting as a subcontractor meeting or a client meeting or a staff meeting, or even over into the BIM coordination meetings, which we'll hit on here in a second. So go ahead and hop to that next slide, Patrick. And really what I wanted to get into next was is really the goals and what we wanted to get out of this. And so before we started this project, we really had a couple ideas. And we wanted to see how this drone data could really eliminate the number of meetings that we could have really throughout the week. I know that sounds silly to think, hey, we're trying to decrease the number of meetings that we have, but I think when we've all been in ineffective meetings, we're like, man, I didn't really get anything out of that. And so that was an idea that we had is, man, can we really leverage this drone data to eliminate the need for multiple meetings? And the second one there is, man, we wanted to see if this drone data could improve the meetings that we had, meaning that we wanted to communicate on relevant and specific site information and documentation that was going on out on the site. And so really those were the two goals that we had as it related to leveraging these systems, both hardware and software, into these meetings that we had out on site. And what I kind of wanted to note here before hopping to this next part here is, man, when it comes to innovation, you really have to have faith. And the part to that is that you really have to have faith to say, hey, this is something new that we want to do, and you don't necessarily know if it's going to work. So these goals were pretty lofty. We thought, man, it would be great if we could eliminate some of these meetings, but we don't necessarily know if that's going to happen. And so just the key there is that, man, innovation takes faith. And I think a lot of us probably on this call and the coworkers that you guys work with can really fuel that fire when you do start to have faith in the innovative part of trying to improve these things. And so why is this important? Really because multiple meetings can reduce communication, right? It's kind of this opposite attracts of sorts and saying, hey, if we have more meetings, we must be talking about more things, but that's not always necessarily the case. And so the decrease in efficiency that can come from those meetings is obviously pretty obvious when we get into some of those parts too. And then just to hit it home again, communicating what's happening out in the field is critical. That's where the work is being done. That's where the hammers are being swung. That's where the drywall is going up. And so we really need to know and support those people that are out in the field. And so finally, I just wanted to kind of move into the solution of really what we found as it related to incorporating this drone data into our workflows. And so when Patrick goes to the next slide here, there's really just a couple pictures, and I'm going to camp out here for a little bit and kind of talk about what's going on in these pictures. But what I loved about this project team and how they set up their meeting spaces and their trailer was that they really were pretty adamant about projecting onto a whiteboard. And so when I was there, I was like, okay, that makes sense. I can imagine how that could work. You know, you have other space with things around it, which you can see in that picture to the left. But their intent was really to use it as a way to interact and engage with the people that are in this meeting. I was attending one of their meetings, and someone was complaining about something and really was kind of going off on just being frustrated. And the superintendent stood up and he threw the marker at him and said, hey, get up on the whiteboard and show me what we can do to improve this and what we can do to make this better. which was, it was just shocking. I was like, man, there's this opportunity here for us to get up and interact with this data and information with just a marker, and how powerful a marker can be to leverage good quality collaboration in some of these meetings. And so that picture on the left was really just us as it relates to the BIM coordination meetings that we were having. And so another takeaway of what this project team did was that they split the screen into the Skycatch map, that is what I'm pointing to on the left, and then the actual BIM model, which is on the right. And so I think a lot of us can relate, if we've gotten into some of these BIM coordination meetings really early on the project, that BIM model really doesn't progress its way into the actual construction, right? Everything's coordinated, things have been sent to be manufactured, but it doesn't need to be a book that's left on the shelf that collects dust. We really want to use that model throughout the entire project to make sure that we're building to it. And so one way that this project team did that was that they would pull that coordination model up right next to the Skycatch map. And so what that really allowed us to do was to compare these side by side and say, hey, this is what we're planning on building. Is this what we're actually building when we looked at the map? And so it was just a really, really neat way to see how these project team members interacted with everyone who was kind of having a part and say while working with this information. And then the picture on the right, I love this. We were talking about a couple of these air handling units that were on the roof that we were capturing and seeing on these maps that we would produce every 2 weeks for this project team. And what was really interesting is they were starting to build the walls around these air handling units. And so the challenge there is we had a really hard time visualizing, okay, how are these walls going to be made? What was our actual plan when we were doing this? And so I'm pointing at the air handling units that were sitting there. But then on the BIM model on the right, it was really neat because we could pull back different things and start to see, okay, hey, this is what our coordination model was showing. This is the areas that we really wanted to coordinate these different pieces of equipment. And so it was just really cool to be able to have those two pieces of information right next to each other from what was actually happening out in the field, real time, or from that last week's map that we created to what was being planned on being constructed from the BIM model. And so I just really like these examples. It was just a very practical way to, again, get people up out of their seats and say, hey, start to draw on this thing, whether it's the BIM model or the site map that we created. Get them up, get them engaged in the information, and really start to leverage the use of this information of what's going on out in the field and what we plan to be constructed with within the BIM model. So I love these pictures, and kind of the next slide here was another part to this solution, not just putting these up on a whiteboard, but was actually the process of just repetition. And so Patrick mentioned it a little bit earlier, talking about how the Skycatch app can repeat the missions, but this is crucial. We do this all the time in BIM meetings where we set up weekly meetings, and we really want to make sure that there's consistency in that communication. And so that should be the same standard that we set when it comes to capturing this aerial data. And the benefit here is that this is already in place. We're really able to get that repetition and rhythm set up with the reuse of these missions that are inside the Skycatch app itself. And so this was just great. We didn't have to go out there, adjust the mission and all. It was really a rinse and repeat type of system where we could say, okay, we need to go capture this. We don't have to go and recreate the wheel. We already have this mission saved. And I just really, really liked this application here where it was like, okay, hey, we can go, we can repeat this very easily because we're used to doing that on the BIM coordination side out to the actual drone data capture component of this. So, and then finally, the last solution, which is on this next slide I wanted to talk about, was really what we found is taking advantage of these tools to their full capacity. And so I'm going to camp here a little bit as well, and just saying that, man, communication without context, or I'm sorry, communication with context is crucial. And the reason behind that is what we noticed is people were starting to just look at our site logistics plans and saying, okay, this is a PDF, it has nice markups on it, it has good diagrams, but there wasn't any context to it. They didn't necessarily know what was going on site in those specific areas, or where, as it related to the project itself, where they needed to be working. And so taking advantage of the dashboard online with our overlays was really, really neat to see, okay, hey, we're starting to blend these two pieces of information together, which was great, because I really thought that this was an opportunity for us to say, okay, we're leveraging that planned initiative of, hey, this is where we want to go with our site logistics plan, to the actual of what was actually happening out on site. And so when we started to overlay that information, it was really, really encouraging to see how much communication even stemmed from just even two pieces of information being on the same page together. And so one kind of specific quote to this was, I loved one of our subcontractors. He happened to be doing our concrete work on this job. He's like, man, you know, I never knew or could really just have a hard time visualizing where grid lines were and saying, hey, I don't really know where grid line B5 to B10 is when I'm looking at a structural plan. Or I don't necessarily know how that sequence really plays into what's going on out in the field. And he said, man, when we started to overlay that information on the actual aerial map of the project, it's like, man, I made that connection. I knew where grid line B5 to B10 was because I saw it. I had that context with what you guys were communicating on the site logistics plan. And so it was just really, really cool to kind of see, hey, this isn't just a tool for us specifically, whether it's a general contractor or the design team that's starting to overlay some of these PDFs or CAD files on these maps. It can go all the way down to the subcontractor level and just saying, hey, I need that context to really understand where this is actually physically being in place out in the field. So it was just really neat to see that comment from them and saying, hey, I finally got it. When you gave me some context of what was going on site to what our plan was in the office, I finally understood this was what was needed to be done. And so, and again, that's simply happening from just bringing two pieces of information together from your PDF to your site map that was being created from the drone photos. So, and then finally, just to wrap up this kind of site collaboration and really improving some of these meetings, was just a learning opportunity that we saw. And so on the next slide here, I just have 4 points, and I want to go over a couple of them more specifically. But these are just some takeaways for you guys as we talk about some learning opportunities and mistakes to avoid as it relates to, hey, what were some things that we got hiccuped on that I think will save you guys some headaches too. So Patrick, go ahead and flip to that next slide here. Perfect. So these 4 points, and I kind of hit on some of them as we were talking, but the first one is, man, don't just sit there, right? Let's get up out of our seats and let's start to engage in the information. And we were really, really surprised. I think a lot of us can relate and say, man, there's some people in meetings that are just kind of quiet. They show up, they kind of just check the box and say, yep, I was here, I put my name on the agenda sheet, but they don't really ever engage. And so when we started to actually put markers around the table and say, hey, if you have something, go up and talk about it. Those people were the most vocal because they felt like, hey, I finally have a platform and I finally have a medium to talk where someone can understand and relate to the issues that I'm having, because I have this context and I have these different visuals that are helping me communicate in ways that I haven't been able to communicate before. And so engaging those people in a way to say, hey, come on up, let's get on this whiteboard, let's start to mark up these things, whether it's on the BIM model or the site map, was just really, really neat to see how that kind of evolved. And the second point here too is, hey, bring in as many people as possible. I think a lot of times people don't want to come to meetings because they don't think that they're going to be effective. And so with the opposite of this, we're saying, hey, we think these meetings are really, really effective. And so we want to widen the circle. We want to bring as many people in as possible and say, hey, we want your input. We want you to feel like you are a part of this team and have ownership of your specific scope, but more importantly, how it relates to this project as a whole and the team that we're really trying to push forward with. And then the third point is pretty obvious, but I think it's worthy to note, is that, hey, don't leave these meetings without a clear understanding of who is doing what. And the reason that that's important is that we can get up on the whiteboard and we can mark up all these things and we can interact with both of these maps and, I'm sorry, the map and the model and engage with this information all day. And it can feel like a really, really effective meeting. But if we're not going to leave that meeting with specific and clear understanding of, hey, this is what you need to do with this information, this is where you need to go, and this is what needs to be done, that meeting would be ineffective. And so taking that through the finish line and saying, hey, you need to try to, or you need to go and do what we had talked about in this meeting, you now should have a full picture, HD, full color of where that is happening out on site where the direction we need to go. So that's really, really important. And we found that we weren't necessarily doing that. And that was something that we learned really early in our projects, was we weren't leaving with those specific things of, hey, these are great meetings, but we need to leave here with specific points to move on with. And the last one is really just, it's pretty broad. It's that, hey, we thought at the start of this project and really on other projects that there was really only one way to communicate. And that was pulling up one screen, whether it was the BIM model or the site map, and say, hey, we're only going to communicate about this one specific thing. But what we learned is, man, there's so many different ways to communicate this information, and there's so many people that communicate differently. And so the key there is that, hey, we want to share with you guys, and you know, a lot of you know this, is that, hey, there isn't one way to communicate, but there really are effective ways to communicate. And we really felt like the drone data in this specific project really helped us leverage a lot of opportunities to really not, again, going back to our goals, not have multiple meetings, and to really make that connection from the field to the office. And so I just have a couple more slides, because really our hope, like what Patrick was saying, was to open this up for questions. That's really where you guys get a lot of the meat out of these webinars. And so I just have 2 more slides that I wanted to talk about and kind of continue that direction of saying, hey, when we start to integrate this information, whether it's putting a PDF over the map or taking these 2 windows and putting them side by side on this whiteboard, that's where we've seen a significant amount of effectiveness in these meetings. And so what we have on this next slide is a video, and we tested this a little bit earlier to see if it was going to work, and it might be a little choppy, but we can send you guys the link so you can kind of get a visual of how this is going to work. But this stemmed from an idea from our project engineer, who was the BIM coordinator on this job as well. They said, hey, Grant, I love the 2 screens. I love that we can pull both of these up on the same whiteboard, and people can come up and interact with, but hey, can we actually put those 2 things together? Can I take the site map, which is actually the model, and can I bring that into Navisworks? I said, man, that's a great idea. I didn't think that would be something that you guys would want, but we can certainly try to do that. And so as this video kind of chops along here, what you're seeing is the LAS file, which is an export from Skycatch when we do these site models and site maps. And we brought that into our Navisworks model. And so what was really cool about this is that a lot of those BIM coordinators who have really never seen the job before, or maybe may not be out on site, they're seeing the fruit of their labor with the BIM model and saying, oh, hey, this is where you guys are at on site. I can understand kind of what's going on. And so what they're able to see, again, is that context. And so they can see a relevant, specific site map and model of that project and say, okay, I know what's going on. I can adjust my level of priorities based on seeing these different progressions of the job by including this model into the Navisworks model. So again, I know this video is a little choppy, but we can send you guys the link and you can check it out. And we know we're going to get a lot of questions about this, but we could spend an entire webinar just talking about this workflow and really how to streamline it, how to make it efficient, because we're continually testing that process. This was something that I'll hit on a little bit when we have questions that come up, but I really wanted to make sure that we had some time on the back end to answer questions too. So with that, Patrick, I'm sure you guys have gotten quite a few questions come in, and I want to turn it back over to you to just continue into that Q&A.
All right, thank you so much, Grant. That was really excellent. Thanks for going through that, and we do have a bunch of questions, so we've logged those, and I'm going to get to those in just a second. Before we go into that, just heads up for everybody that our next monthly webinar with DJI will be about a month from now in April. Topic is going to be earthworks management. We're bringing in an expert to lead that session and specifically talk about 3 aspects of earthworks management. 1, contractual negotiation before the job starts so that you can get off on the right foot and really set yourself up for success. 2, maintaining a balanced job site on a regular basis. The key there is sort of regularity and frequency. And 3, what's the right way to do ongoing progress reporting for your stakeholders so that it's not too time consuming for you, but you keep everybody appraised of the right information at the right time. To lead the whole project to success. After that, the next topics that we have coming up are getting started in reality capture, so focusing on more of the getting up to speed part. Two, how do you establish in-house drone operations for a general contractor? We'll be bringing in some partners to help talk about that one. Three, doing a deep dive on accuracy, really getting into some of the nuts and bolts of what does accuracy mean? How do you use that? How do you get it? How do you understand whether you're accurate or not? And number four, BIM coordination part two. We're gonna do a follow on to this one to deep dive into more workflows and more uses of the data for BIM coordination. So if anybody's interested in joining us for any of those, or has another topic that they'd either like to see, or like to learn about, or like to actually present, please just reach out, P Stewart, and that's S-T-U-A-R-T, pstewart@skycatch.com. Hit me up. I would love to hear from you. All right, so now we are going to Q&A. Let's see. I think the first question we'll give to you, Grant, is from Krishna, which is it possible to associate cost savings by using the drone data for a project? And then I think this is a two-part. Also, is this a requirement from the owner or client, or is it more of a tech innovation from BEC? So we'd love to, Grant, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that one.
You bet. I'm writing those down so I can make sure I hit both of them. Yeah, to the first one about documenting just cost savings, it's a great question, and that's a really good framework of mind to sit in. What we actually did is, for this project specifically, we had some KPIs or key performance indicators from the beginning of the project that said, hey, if we know how many people are in meetings and really the duration of the length of those meetings, we want to really document really the cost savings behind that too, right? I mean, we're sitting in some meetings and we look around the table and we're like, man, these people are pretty expensive, whether they're our staff or our client staff or our subcontractor staff. And so really, as we related to the cost and time savings, you know, it's really weird to look at a meeting and say, hey, that hour is probably worth, you know, $10,000. And I don't want to say that that is the best way to document the cost savings that came here, because really I think the best way to document the cost savings is in just the hours of rework. I think our industry is very familiar with just the cost of being on a job daily, whether it relates to the staff in the office or even the staff in the field. And so what we've done is we've really started to say, when we've come across these issues like the rooftop units, for example, we started to say, hey, how would we have done this before? What were the ways that we would have collaborated on this, and what kind of meetings would we have had to really install this correctly? And so what we did is that was basically our baseline, and that gave us something to work off of and say, hey, we probably would have had 2 or 3 meetings. We probably would have talked about these topics in those meetings, and then we compare that to what actually happened, which was bringing everyone for one meeting, having the relevant information of the map that was created, you know, just 2 or 3 days in advance, and say, hey, here's where we're at. What can we do, knowing this information of what's relevant out in the field with that context of that, and here's where we want to go with what we've done in the BIM model. So I guess the best way I can answer the cost component of it is really start to dive into the cost per person per hour. I know that sounds crazy, but when that really starts to add up and you're dropping meetings off of your schedule, you're really allowing yourself more time to input into the actual production of the project. So that's probably the best way I would explain capturing the cost savings. The second part that you asked about, just required from the owner, on this project specifically, this was not required from the owner. But I love this quote, and it's kind of been stuck in my head from the client that we worked on specifically. They're a healthcare client of ours, and they have other general contractors and design teams that work for them. But in one of our owners' meetings, they said, man, I've never known so much about a project without needing to ask you guys questions of where you're at. The visuals that you provide me and provide us as a team, it increases our amount of trust that we have with you, because we know all the parts and pieces of what you guys are working on. And so I just thought that was really neat and spoke really highly to the visuals and the things that we brought into these meetings, is that, hey, our clients basically saying, hey, we know more about your project than the other projects that we're working on purely based on the visuals and how you present them to us as a client. So on this project, it wasn't required to do these things, but I would think that they would be a little disappointed if we didn't continue down this path on the next project that we're working on for them. Just really right across across the street, it's another open field that we're doing another project for them right there. So I hope that answers your question. If not, we can touch on that a little bit more.
Awesome, thanks, Grant. That's a really amazing perspective, and the story about that client at the end there, that's really powerful. So, and I would add that, it didn't show up in this presentation, but you've shown me before that you have a really, really, I would say, impressive and effective way to regularly update your clients with visuals from the project, from drones via email. That looks very professional, it's very well organized, and it's actually easy for you to do now that you have your template set up. So maybe, when we hit up a part 2 of this, we might be able to teach everybody a little bit about that too. All right, so the next question is from Steve, and Steve's question is, what is the best way to show potential clients the value of this data, and who is the best person in the project team to present this data that you would give the highest chance of success for getting the job? So really focusing on sort of the pursuit of the job phase.
Yeah, you bet. I wrote down the first question. Can you repeat the second part of it?
Hey, sorry about that, Grant. The second part, so first part is best way to show potential clients the value of the data. Then it's who's the best person in the project team to present this data that would basically give you the best chance of success for actually winning the job. So best way to show it, and who's the right person on the team to present it.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks, Steve, for sending that in. I would say the best way to show it that we've found, you can pass this off to your marketing team and really get them to do some nice creative proposals, or include images. But really, man, the best way that we've shown them is to really just pull up Skycatch and to say, hey, here's what we're doing online, and it's great because the fact that it's just a website. If those conversations happen in their office, I just say, hey, can I pull up a web page and kind of show you what this looks like specifically? I feel like the best way to show this is to show them what the end user would interact with, and to really show them, hey, this is how simple it is to use. This is how we use these different layers. Here's how we use some volumetric parts and some earthwork calculations. It's really just getting them to engage in the actual tool itself. Now, obviously, that comes with the savviness of the person you're presenting it to, and you kind of have to play off that from just the knowledge that you have. But man, I would just say the best way that we've shown them is really just pulling it up. I'll attend meetings not knowing if we're going to talk about some of this information, and then kind of at the end, they'll say, hey, Grant, could you maybe show them what we're looking to do with some of our drone data on this project? And I'll say, sure, let's pull open the website, and we'll kind of dive into what we're doing on a project that's similar. Right, so this healthcare client, we're doing 2 or 3 other projects for them that happen to be also in Skycatch, and so to show them, hey, we're doing this already. Here's some of the kind of things that we've done and seen some value from. They start to interact and say, oh, okay, like I can see that in a very practical way. And the best part about that is that there's no smoke and mirrors to it, right? I think sometimes some of our clients can get a little frustrated that we oversell things and underdeliver, and the reality is I'm not really overselling anything. I'm selling them exactly what we're doing right away, or in the current. And so that's the best part about it, is there's not you don't have to adjust the conversation later because it's like, oh, I maybe showed them too much or didn't show them something specific. You're showing them the exact thing of what we're using. So that would be the best way I would describe the first one. The second one is the best person to do that. Man, that's a great question. I would say it would be a person that has a balance of experience and just an excitement. So the experience end is like, hey, if the client typically interacts with the project manager, the site superintendent, or someone else, that experience and relational trust that's already there, that's a great foundation to build off of when you're wanting to show them something new. But the excitement is really kind of the intangible that I think is that obviously I love talking about this stuff, and I really enjoy showing people and seeing their light bulbs kind of go off and say, oh, okay, I can kind of see that. And so excitement is contagious. And so if you have someone that's on site, and that could even be down to a project engineer and saying, hey, I'm really excited about how this is going to help us as a team and help you as a client. I think those two things are the things that stand out, is that you obviously want to have someone that's knowledgeable about it and who's used it on multiple different projects specifically. But man, the excitement is intangible that I really think kind of goes unnoticed sometimes, is that it's contagious and people kind of feed off of that. And so I would say identifying whoever that person might be would be the best way to kind of tackle that.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Grant. Really good info there. Next question is from William. And it's kind of related to that last one. His question is, and Grant, you can see this in the little chat box we sent to you too, but convincing companies to adopt or at least experiment with UAVs requires the desire of company executives as well as engineers that may be otherwise, quote, set in their ways using the old methods. So do you have any recommendations for getting these people on board? And I mean, you probably went through this yourself when you were getting started at Beck. So I'd love to hear, obviously, William, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, totally, William. I am right there with you. And this is a question I do get asked often. And man, I think the thing that that continues to really rise to the top, and the best way to answer how do you get executives and engineers who are really just, hey, that sounds great. It sounds like a great toy. Thanks for taking the time to present to us. How do you get them on board? Man, the biggest thing that I've tried to do, and this is a really tough mountain to climb, is changing the mindset from this is a toy to a tool. Everyone knows the application of an excavator or a backhoe or man lift that's on a project, right? Everyone can say, yeah, that's a piece of construction equipment. I understand how it's used. But the challenge that we have as really innovators and people who interact with these new things is that it seems like a toy, right? So people are like, oh, I can go buy that at a hobby store. I can buy it at Best Buy or Amazon. And really honing in on the fact, I mean, when I talk about these things, I always say, hey, this is a tool that we're using to do our job. Because in the back of their mind, if they still think that this is a toy, they really will take that mindset of, hey, this is just something that doesn't seem worthy that I'm want to invest in both time and resources. And so that's part one. And part two to it is really just the proof in the pudding. I mean, when you start to get these things really ramped up and start to say, hey, here's the lessons learned. I probably never documented as many things and lessons learned and value adds in any other piece of innovation that I've had a chance to work on more than I've had with this and just using these drones and aerial cameras. And more specifically because, man, you can't argue with facts, right? I mean, you can't argue in the fact that, hey, this happened to save us 2 meetings. And so, these execs that always happen to go to a lot of meetings, or that we may think that they're in a lot of meetings, I'm telling them, hey, this isn't just smoke and mirrors. These are the facts and data. And if you want to argue that it's a toy, hey, that's fine, and it'll take you some time to kind of change that perception. But, hey, man, I can't argue with the facts. And so that takes a lot of work, a lot of perseverance, a lot of documentation, which sometimes as innovators, me probably more than ever, just kind of falls to the wayside. But man, that's the stuff that is the sweetest part when you can go and take it to some of those higher level people and say, hey man, these are just the facts. If you choose to not really look at them, then all my job is to do is just to present that to you. So I know that you've probably heard some of those answers before, but hopefully maybe hitting and reiterating some of those to kind of re-encourage you of like, hey, that with perseverance is really the best way that we've found.
All right, thanks, Grant, for that one. Next question is from Dennis, and Dennis's question is, would you recommend to do drone imaging and modeling internally, or can we hire an outside company, what would you recommend? And then I would add to that, if do you have experience in both, and what are what are the differences?
Yeah, Dennis, thanks for asking that. That's a great question. I would say that is something that we still continually evaluate, probably every 3 to 4 months, as we're just continuing down this path. I would say the biggest thing for us, so I can kind of speak on the Beck behalf, is that because we do both architecture and construction, for us, it seemed like there was enough value and impact on both sides or both industries. And so for us, we said, hey, we do want to dedicate a full person to really understand and leverage these really workflows and how this can provide value for us. And so I would say it has to start with your internal company kind of understanding and saying, okay, we know the cost, right? We know the equipment, we know kind of the cost behind each person and what that time cost would look like, but then also just your project diversity too. And if it's something that you feel, hey, we do want to tackle this internally, because there are benefits both ways. I mean, there are times when I'm like, hey, you know what? We just don't have the people to go out and perform it on 20, 30, 40 plus jobs. So that might be a time when we start to incorporate with other people to hire on as just contractors in that area. But for us, at least, we really started with our own circle. So our own circle of influence was saying, hey, what do we as a company think that we'll get value out of this? And is this something that we want to take on? And we really felt like it was a good solution for us, because we said, hey, we do have some pretty significant impact in both of these industries. And we felt like it was something that was going to change fast enough, which I think a lot of us would agree. It is changing very quickly. And so continuing to be subject matter experts in these areas has proven to be valuable in that sense too, because we kind of see it as a jet ski that we can really move and adjust quickly, rather than just a big maybe cruise ship that takes a while to kind of navigate and move in those directions. So we wanted to equip ourselves with a jet ski and really say, hey, this is something that we think is going to change a lot over time and provide us a lot of value. And obviously jet skis are fun too. So yeah, that's kind of the decision that we've made. So I hope that answers your question. It's really just focusing on the internal component of, hey, what do we as a company want to do and approach this with?
Awesome. Thanks, Grant, for that. The next question is from Simon. Simon's question is, once you get past the earthwork, site work, and site logistics, how can the drone data still be made useful? So, follow-on phases of the project. So that's past earthwork, site work, and site logistics. What are some other ways and some other phases?
Yeah, it's a great question, Simon. Thanks for, yeah, that's a good question. I would say past the earthwork and site work and logistics phase, what's kind of funny is, we build buildings that go vertical. So there's a lot of stuff to visualize, inspect, document, really as we go into that vertical environment. And so I would say there's the earthwork component is really only 20%. I think when it comes to the built-up environment, there's just a lot of stuff to document, to inspect, to visualize, really as we go along the project, whether that's just the skin components or roofing components. That there is so much value there in just replacing man lifts and different pieces of equipment that frankly are a lot more unsafe than what these tools have provided us. So I would say the inspection phase is really where these things kind of started to take off, and that's where we at Beck had kind of started. We said, hey, we think these things can really help us as it comes to safety and inspections, and kind of fell into the mapping side of it. So yeah, I would say the earthwork and site work stuff is really just, I don't want to say the tip of the iceberg, but it really, to us, isn't the most important and significant part, and there's even lots more to that we can kind of cover too.
Awesome. That's a really great insight, Grant. Actually, it's just sort of the breakdown of percentages, and there's so much to do, and so much still for everybody to learn how to integrate this technology into all aspects of the projects. That'd probably be a good inspection, maybe a good one for a future webinar too. Next question is from Pedro, and the question is, do you have any experience with the integration of all the information, drone captures, structures, etc., in a content management software in order to control the advancement in the BIM process? If so, please tell us about the software. So how do you pull all this stuff together and sort of manage it and
Yeah.
organize it?
Yeah, great question, Pedro. I would say to that last slide that we were talking about, that really had that kind of integration of the LAS file into the Navisworks model. That's where we're starting. And I would say that we haven't perfected that yet. There's a lot of kind of sub workflows that go in there as it relates to ground control points and different things. And so I would say that, so really the software that we've been using, our design teams design with Revit, our construction teams coordinate with Navisworks, a lot of the same tools that are out there. And so those are the just different pieces of software that we're starting to see. But what's been great is even working with Patrick for, even the last couple of years, is saying, hey, these are the certain files that we need. Here's how we're moving around into these different software platforms has been really, really advantageous and beneficial to not only just us, but for them too, because these things really need to talk to each other. And so I know that's not really answering your question specifically, and other than our experience that we're having is very young. We're starting to play around with a lot of these different file types and what we can do, and then understanding, okay, now that we can do that, what's the true workflow that is going to be efficient in making that process sufficient down the road. So those are kind of some of the quick answers to that. And feel free to follow up with something specific if maybe I needed to hit on that. But
nice. Thanks, Grant. So the next question is what are some of the KPIs you're recording to justify the use? And I think you touched on KPIs earlier in the first or second question, but I think that this is a really good angle, which says you're asking for some capital or some budget to use for this technology as you're working through what you just talked about, which is learning how to best use this information and these tools. So as you're reporting that up the chain and either asking for more budget or sort of showing the rest of the company, here's what you're actually getting for that budget. What are sort of your top three, and how do you go about actually one of the hardest parts sometimes in KPIs is collecting the information that goes into those. How do you go about getting that info, and then how do you go about actually reporting that out?
Whew, what a question. That's a great one. KPIs are not only just kind of a big topic, but yeah, they bear a lot of weight, right? Because we were talking about just leadership and different things as it relates to passing those over. The thing that comes to mind is just categories of KPIs. And so when we talk about some categories that we look at, obviously client satisfaction is huge. There's a lot of subtopics underneath that KPI as it relates to just what information we're presenting, how often we're presenting it, their satisfaction with that. I mean, those are all things that we collect. So for our integrated projects, we have what we call integrated project survey that we fill out every month, which is the subcontractors up to the client, and saying, hey, these are just some things that we want to know about. What's been your satisfaction level with this? And the subpart to that is we have those surveys that are sent out to document meetings, right? Because it's crazy that we're so focused on meetings, but man, there's so much time and resources spent to bring those people together. And so that one way that we are documenting that KPI is really just through these surveys that we're incorporating with our integrated project survey, which is great because we can see those trends and get that comment and get those comments and feedbacks from those surveys and say, hey, is your satisfaction, even subcontractor all the way up to client, is your satisfaction being met? And what are some things that are allowing that to be met or not to be met? And so I think client satisfaction is one of those topics that is one that we use significantly. And the other I would just say would be labor cost or really as it relates to time out in the field. And so obviously how we can do that is really documenting the typical process of what we would have gone through, going back to that roof example. Hey, this is what we would have done. That's the baseline that we're starting to kind of function off of. And here's kind of this new process that we've put into place to document, hey, hours saved, man hours saved, or even just equipment or material that we maybe saved because we can think of a little bit better way to construct it. So it's a great question. There's so much about KPIs we can talk about just because they are very important. But the big takeaway is, hey, they're important, and so we should focus on them. And more importantly, we should document them. And so really through surveys, which what we've been doing has been a great way to do that. And so I hope that answers somewhat of that question, because we could talk about that for a long time.
Yeah, that could be a whole webinar in itself. We're really at the end of the time here, Grant. I'll ask a question if you can give the sort of the 5-second answer here, because it's an amazing question. Great follow-on to that one, and I think we actually could see this for future entire session. But this comes from Patrick, not me, but Patrick says, "What is the average margin or percentage that you save, your clients or yourselves on a typical job?" Or have you had a client say, "Hey, this is how much we think this technology actually meant to the bottom line"? Do you have a short answer for that, or is that an entire another hour?
I would say I have an idea of a percentage. Man, without throwing out a lot of qualifiers to what goes into that percentage, a percent. I mean, percent could be cost, percent could be hours. But there's a lot of percents that we could really talk about of what it's saving. Going back to the meeting space, hey, our goal is to even start with 2 meetings a week, which we feel like if we have 10 meetings a week, obviously that's reducing it by 20%. And it really, as it relates to some other key parts to it with cost, it's really hard to just throw out a percentage, because the percentage isn't super broad across all these different levels, whether it's scopes of work, or meeting types that we have. And so I would say to narrow it down to a specific percentage would be really tough to do. But yeah, I know it's not the best answer, like, just give me a percentage, but that's kind of the thought.
Because but I think the important part there is that it does require some thought. It's not as simple as just a single number. Obviously, that you want to boil it down to something understandable and easy to communicate. And I think we can have a whole session on that in the future. So I think that actually wraps us up. We're at 11:01 here on the West Coast. So I just wanted to say thank you so much, Grant, for joining us and sharing just really amazing experience, insights, and approach to doing things in a sort of smarter, faster, better way, using some exciting new technology that is most importantly very directly useful for your business, for your clients. I want to say thanks to DJI for sponsoring this with us, and finally, most importantly, thanks for everybody who joined up and attended and asked questions. This recording will be available on our website, skycatch.com/learn, after the fact, and it's also going to be sent to everybody who joined up. We'll also be making a PDF of the slides available, and last slide here just has Grant's contact information as well as mine. If you have any follow-up questions, we'd love to hear from you. We really look forward to joining everybody in a month, in April, for the next webinar. And I think that's it. Thanks a lot, Grant. Really appreciate having you with us.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Really, really appreciate the time, and looking forward to catching up with whoever might have some follow-up questions. So thanks again, Patrick, and for putting this on. We really appreciate it.
All right. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.